Yeah.
Okay, so we can share screen
Yes,
via
yes.
Zoom. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so should I then keep my presentation on now?
Yes, ma'am. Now we are live on YouTube.
You're live, so you can start.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. So we are very happy to receive a really overwhelming response to this webinar from all over the world. And we are very happy that you are joining us today. I'm Manisha Pathak Shilith. I'm editor of the Journal of Creative Communications, JOCC. I'm also professor of communication and digital platforms and strategies at MICA, and I chair MICA Center for Development, Management and Communication. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you and also our brilliant speakers on behalf of Sage Publications, JOCC, and MICA's doctoral level program, FPM. So let me begin with introducing JOCC to you. JOCC was established in 2006 and MICA and SAGE collaborated to begin it. And it promotes inquiry into contemporary communication issues within wider social, economic, political, cultural, technological, marketing, and management contexts, and provides a forum for the discussion of theoretical as well as practical insights emerging from this inquiry. JOCC is a double-blind peer-reviewed journal. And for those who are very new to publishing, double-blind means that, when you submit your paper and it goes for review, the reviewers do not know who the authors are and the authors do not know who the reviewers are. We welcome all methodological and theoretical perspectives. And I would say that now that we are in the 15th year, it would be good to just view some of our accomplishments. So on the map here, you see the countries from which JOCC receives contributions. And we are very glad that, we are becoming more and more global and we get contributions from all over the world. So going with that philosophy, we have in the last 3 years, last 4 years, JOCC has strengthened its global presence, its global character. So we have published papers from more than 22 countries. And I'm also glad that our editorial committee is really, really diverse and, from all parts of the world. So our associate editors represent countries like India, US, Australia, China, Korea, and our authors too, represent a very diverse range of topics and methodologies and philosophies. So we were just discussing, that pandemic has been very, very hard on most of us, but there have been a few, I would say, silver linings to the cloud. And one of that is that people have somehow, focused more on scholarly work, writing, publishing. And we can see that like this year, we witnessed a sizable spike in the number of submissions. So we had 325 manuscripts received in 2021 against 174 in the previous year. So you can see the spike in the manuscript that come to JOCC. We have also started very active dissemination on social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Quora, and YouTube. It doesn't only help, JOCC get more recognition, but it also helps our authors, because your work when published in JOCC is widely disseminated by SAGE and us. So that is another positive thing. You can see some of the numbers here. I would say that, in the last 1 year, the site score has gone up from 0.9 to 0.21. So this is the first time that, we've reached site score of 1. And then the H index has gone from 9 to 10. So we are gradually going up in every criterion. We are listed in all the major indexes like EBSCO, Scopus, for India, UGC CARE, and many others, which I have not even put here. We are very proud to share, the 2 special issues that JOCC will be coming out this year. Let me share the details. So in July 2021, our special issue on innovative communication strategies for the present and future pandemics is coming out. The guest editors are Professor Do Kyun David Kim. He's a professor at Louisiana, University of Louisiana at Lafayette, and Professor Arvind Singhal from University of Texas, El Paso. They are the guest editors. This issue has received attention from, again, scholars from all over the world. What is interesting is that, because this issue contributes to handling the pandemic situation, it's going to be open access. And most of the papers are already out on SAGE Online First. So this is a good time to check out those papers from the special issue. And of course, the entire issue will be officially released in July. The second special issue is coming out in November 2021, and it is titled Creative Communications and Interactions Among Stakeholders. Professor Sandra Maria Correa Loureiro from ISCTE IUL Portugal is going to be our guest editor, and we already have manuscripts in place for this special issue. So I'm now an active researcher myself, and I published fairly widely, but I have not forgotten my journey from an emerging scholar, with very little resources, scant guidance, meager support, and almost no mentoring, to becoming, editor of a well-regarded, well-reputed journal. So I strongly believe that, publication success needs institutional support, guidance, prolonged mentorship, and also the right information, right? So of course, in this seminar, we cannot provide you all of that, but I'm very happy that we will be able to share with you some very valuable information, some practical tips and guidance that should make your publication journeys little less mystifying and painful. And that is what so many emerging scholars tell us. And it's kind of sad, that something that is such a joyful experience, researching, sharing your findings, being in touch with other scholars. Why should it become less than joyful process? So we are here for that reason today. This is only the first in many other webinars that we are going to offer. So staying true to JOCC and MICA's vision of nurturing global scholars, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome the brilliant speakers today. JOCC Associate Editors, Dr. Kallol Das, Dr. Kirsten Thorson, Dr. Rajat Roy, Dr. Yang Sung Hong, and Dr. Yuan Wang. I'm also very pleased to welcome Debbie Dar from SAGE Publications and Professor Varsha Jain, Chair of FPM MICA. I think I have something very important to do here, is to thank our Backstage team, because without them, this webinar would not have been possible. So Arpit, we would really like if you can switch on your video, you all, and at least show your face to everybody, because by now everybody has heard from you and they would like to see who Arpit is. So I must mention that, Arpit is the editorial assistant to JOCC, and he has put in a lot of effort in making this webinar a success. He's ably assisted in this webinar by Leslie Bashian, Archie Sharma, and our own MICA IT team. We couldn't have done this without them. So thanks a lot. So I think this is all from me, and I would now invite our speakers one by one and introduce them. So first, I would like to invite Professor Yuan Wang. Yuan is assistant professor in Department of Media and Communication at City University of Hong Kong. His research interests focus on strategic role of digital media in public relation process and outcomes, including organization, public relations, public engagement, and dialogic communication through social scientific approaches. Yuan has published numerous articles in peer-reviewed journals, such as Journal of Broadcasting and Electronic Media, New Media and Society, International Journal of Strategic Communication, Social Science Computer Review, and Nonprofit Management and Leadership. He has also received research grants from universities and governments and awards from international professional associations. Yuan has been serving on editorial board for the Frontiers in Political Science and the International Journal of Crisis Communication. So Yuan, a very warm welcome to you. Yuan is going to discuss on choosing a journal for publishing a paper. Over to you, Yuan.
Okay, thank you, Professor Shailat, for introducing me. Hello, everyone. It's my great honor to talk about how to choose a journal for publishing a paper with all of you. So in my talk, I will briefly talk about the criteria of journal selection, how to search for appropriate journals, and how to select journals for your own paper. Okay, actually, the most important criterion of journal selection is fitness, including fitness of topics, methodology, and theory. First of all, you need to think about the topic of your own paper. For example, if your topic is about the effects of organization-employee relationships, probably you can think about a public relations journal or organizational communication journal, such as Management Communication Quarterly and Public Relations Review. And also, you need to think about the methodology of your own paper, whether it's qualitative study or quantitative study. Actually, some journals have their own methodology preference. For example, some journals prefer to publish qualitative studies, while other journals prefer to publish quantitative studies. For example, as we all know, as some of you may know, for example, television and new media is a journal that prefers qualitative studies, and also some journals have their preferred theories. For example, general communication journals usually prefer to publish studies using general communication theories, for example, agenda setting theory and framing theory. If your paper uses public relations theory, such as relationship management theory, or situational crisis communication theory, probably you can consider to submit your paper to a public relations journal, which value public relations theories. And you also need to think about a journal's reputation. Actually, most communication scholars, especially senior scholars, have their own perceptions of journal reputation. They know which journal is better and which journal is not that good. For example, as many of you may know, Journal of Communication is one of the best journals in the communication field. That is journal reputation, and also some flagship journals such as Journalism and Mass Communication Quarterly, Journal of Broadcasting and Electronic Media are also good journals with good reputation. And if you don't know journal reputation, you can also consider journal indexing. This kind of information can be found on a journal's official website. For example, if you visit the Journal of Creative Communications website, you will be able to find the indexing information. For example, JOCC is indexed in Scopus and Emerging Source citation index, and so forth. And here I just listed two well-known indexing systems: Social Science Citation Index, SSCI, and Scopus. Actually, SSCI has included about 92 journals in the communication field, while the Scopus includes about 384 journals in the communication field. So both journal databases are well-known databases. If you journals included in those databases are also good journals, you can feel free to submit your paper to those journals. And some universities also require journal metrics, high journal metrics, for example, impact factor and site score. You can also find such information on a journal's website. Especially impact score is more widely used by social scientists and also scientists. If a journal has a very high impact factor, that usually indicates that it is a good journal with a wide readership. And some universities have their own internal list. For example, here in my department, we have two lists, one A+ list and one A journal list. Both lists include many good communication journals. I believe many universities, like your university, may also have such a list. And if you can publish a paper in a journal included in that list, you may receive more recognition, or you can earn a high score in your evaluation, annual review, or something like that. Okay, next let me briefly talk about how to search for appropriate journals. First of all, you can try to think about which journals have published similar studies with your study. For example, if your study is about how organizations can use social media to build relationships with publics. Actually, this is a public relations topic. And if you are familiar with the journals in your field, you may be able to know that, for example, Public Relations Review has published many similar studies. So that may be an appropriate outlet for your study. And you can also, if you don't know, if you are not very familiar with existing journals, you can also refer to some journal databases, for example, Social Science Citation Index and Journal Author Name Estimator. I will show you the website pretty quickly. Okay, this one, sorry. So this one is the database of social science index. So first of all, you can search for a name of a specific journal, for example, New Media and Society, and you will be able to go to the journal's website, the journal's profile page, to say its impact factor and other information. And you can also search for you can also browse by journals if you prefer to submit to a high impact factor journal. Here is GIF quartile. If you prefer to publish in Q1 journals, you can click Q1 and then select some other filters. For example, publisher, you may prefer to publish your paper in Sage or Taylor and Francis. So you can also type in the publisher here, or you can also search for journals based on the keywords. Okay, and also next I will show you another database, journal author name estimator. This is a pretty magic website. You can just input the title of your paper or the abstract of your paper, and then this website can recommend some journals. For you. For example, if your paper is about the effect of employee-organization relationships, and then you can click Find Journals, and then this website can recommend many journals in that field for you, and you can take a look at some journals from this list. Okay, and you can also pay attention to some professional associations journals. For example, in the communication fields, we have many. We have 3 major international professional associations, including International Communication Association, National Communication Association, and Association for Education in Journalism and Mass Communication. Those 3 professional associations have their own affiliated journals. If you go to those professional associations websites, you will be able to find a list of affiliated journals. Those journals are usually high quality journals. And the last way to search for appropriate journals is to find a journal from the reference list of your own paper. So you can go to the reference list of your own paper. If many of your references come from a particular journal, such as Journal of Communication, that may indicate that this journal is a good choice for you. So you can submit your paper to that journal. Okay, finally, let's briefly talk about how to select the right journal. So after you have searched for many journals, you may want to focus on 1 or 2 specific journals, and then you can go to the journal's website to find more information. For example, the journal's aims and scopes. So this part is very important. Indicates the scope of articles, the scope of papers that are published that can be accepted by this journal. And if your paper falls within that scope, that means your paper is a good fit with that journal. And also the guidelines for authors, especially, for example, the length requirement. If your paper is pretty long, including about 10,000 words, you may want to submit your paper to some general communication journals or other similar journals with a longer length requirement, with a larger length requirement. And you can also pay attention to the editor-in-chief and editorial board members. This kind of information is also very helpful. Actually, the editor-in-chief can provide directions for the journal. Some editors-in-chief prefer to publish like qualitative studies or public relations studies or new media studies. And also similarly, editorial board members. If you can find out that most editorial board members are qualitative scholars, that may imply that this journal may prefer to publish qualitative studies. And you can also pay attention to recently published articles. Those articles are if your paper is similar to those recent articles, you can also submit your paper to that journal. And also turnaround time is also very important for many authors. Actually, some journals include turnaround time information on their websites. You can also get to know this information from your colleagues or friends. Some journals have a pretty quick turnaround time, and other journals may have a very long turnaround time, maybe longer than 6 months or 1 year. So you may take this factor into consideration when you submit your paper. And also publication cost. Actually, more and more journals are open access journals. They may require publication cost. If your study can receive funding from any institution, you may be able to afford publication cost. If your study does not have any funding, you may not want to consider a journal that requires publication fees. And finally, let me show you an example of a good journal in the communication field, that is Journal of Communication. So here we can see it is the official website of Journal of Communication. You can find the journal's description, introduction, and scope. For example, it is the flagship journal of International Communication Association, and also the readership and scopes. And also you can find the editorial board information. We can say Dr. Lance Hobart is the editor-in-chief, and also who are associate editors and who are editorial board members, and so forth. And also you can find recent articles, especially advanced articles. Those are the most recent articles published online. So if your study is similar to some of the existing recent papers, that means this journal may be a good choice for you. Okay, that's all for my talk. Thank you for your attention. I will be happy to respond to your questions in the Q&A session. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Yuan. This was very helpful because it addressed the very first step in the publication process. So now I would like to invite Professor Dr. Yang-Sun Hong, and she will be speaking to you about how to prepare your manuscript. Dr. Yang-Sun Hong Sun is an assistant professor in Department of Communication and Journalism in the University of New Mexico. She is a communication scientist who studies health communication and political communication through quantitative methods and critical lens, which is very unique. She is a founder director of Communication and Journalism's Digital Media and Communication for Health and Politics Research Group. Her areas of expertise are health communication, social determinants of health, communication inequality, media and social influence, perception of media influence, political participation, and social media. Sun has received multiple top paper awards and research grants, and she is widely published in reputed journals. So Sun, very warm welcome, and over to you.
Sorry. Okay, thank you, Manisha, for the nice introduction. And hello, everyone. It's really great to talk to you today. So based on the useful information about choosing the right journal for your paper, now let me briefly introduce about JOCC submission guideline at this point. It is because we want to receive manuscript from many of you guys who are listening our webinar today. So let me briefly go over some of the basic guidelines that we have to publish JOCC, publish your paper in a JOCC. Okay, so first of all, we accept two types of manuscripts. The first type of manuscript is typical original research paper article, right? So the word limitation of these types of research manuscript is from about 6,000 to 8,000 words, and it includes everything such as references and tables and figure. And the second types of manuscript that we accept is shorter articles, including commentaries, brief research, case studies, essays, and so on. So typically these types of manuscript, the word limitations, mostly 3,000 to 4,000 words. They also include other references and tables and other things. So let's say once you decide what type of manuscript that you will submit to us, JOCC, then you should develop a very nice first page, right? So I'd like to briefly talk about the first page because it is very, very important for your future research and visibility in the academia, and also choosing the nice reviewer for your paper so that you can actually develop your paper further while the process of the submission. So first of all, in the first page, we usually create title of your manuscript and abstract of 100 to 200 words and 4 or 5 keywords. These are very important because first of all, it is the information that actually can attract readers to your published paper once you publish it with us, right? So readers usually use some keyword that is relevant to their research, right? When they search more articles than when they write an article, right? So for example, we usually use many search engines when we're searching for new academic articles, such as Google and Google Scholars and your university libraries, right? So what we want is once you publish your paper, and you have to choose the best title and the keywords that actually clearly reflect your context of your manuscript. So people who are doing similar research like yours can easily find your article and read, and can continue to have a scholarly conversation throughout the procedure. Second of all, I also want to emphasize that choosing good title and keywords is also very important to get very good reviewer for your paper in a timely manner. So once we, as an editors, once we got your paper submission, then we usually read your article first and then find the best reviewer that actually have expertise in your area, right? However, the potential reviewers of your paper selected by us, editors, will make the decision whether they're gonna review this paper or not solely based on the information in the first page of your manuscript, including title and the abstract and the keyword. So choosing good title and keyword that can clearly reflect your article help you get the best reviewer for your paper and in a fast time. So these are the two reasons that I wanted to highlight about the importance of choosing the good title and writing a good abstract, and also choosing best keywords that reflect your articles. Okay, then once you finish the first page of your article, then you have to write your full manuscript. So I'd like to briefly go over the sections that the full manuscript of the original research article should have. But it's not, several typical articles have very different perspective and different structures. So it's not the only way that we are writing a paper, but it's mostly brief way, just typical way I'm introducing. So first of all, you want to start your article by talking about by writing introduction section. So usually in your introduction section include some brief background of your research and why you think this research is important given this context in the current media landscape or current situation, right? Circumstances. And you also summarize and explain and reasoning why the goals of your research, and you explain why these goals are important in this case. Right, and then you move to the second part, which is literature review area. And in the we want scholars to write a thorough literature review. It is because you once you write a thorough research review that include many good articles and literature and your strong theoretical background, that actually easier for you to propose research questions and hypotheses you have in the manuscript. Okay. And once you propose your research questions and hypotheses based on the literature review of the previous papers and the theoretical background, and then you move to the method part. So in the methodology part, you usually say something like sample and sampling procedure, study procedure, and the measurements and etc. depending on the methodology that you choose. And then you move to results section that actually explain about what you found from your study. And then you move to discussion section that includes theoretical and or practical implication of your study and limitations of your study, and also your suggestions for the future studies based on what you found in the manuscript. And then you make the conclusion there too. After that, in a new page, you have to provide a reference list. And then you will prepare tables and figure, and then you will finish your manuscript with the endnote if you have. In JOCC, we only accept endnote, and we don't accept footnotes. Okay, and since we are talking about JOCC, I'd like to briefly talk about some of the criteria we have in terms of the writing formats that we follow in JOCC. So first of all, in JOCC manuscript, we use British English spellings. So once you finish your manuscript, and then if you decide to submit your manuscript to us, and then I strongly recommend you to check some of the spellings that is a little bit different across the countries, and depending on what types of spelling that you use, right? Something like globalization and labor. And second of all, we use APA style 7th edition currently. So this 7th edition was released about 2 years ago, and we want our manuscript to follow the writing style, the format, and reference style of the APA style 7th edition. So referencing is a scholarly agreement, right? So it is the first impression that editors have when we first see your manuscript. And also this is the first impression that your reviewers have when they see your manuscript, if you actually read it carefully. So I strongly recommend you to check very carefully about your referencing and formatting and writing style based on the required format. So if you are not familiar with APA style, you can check this book, APA style publication manual book, and it has very detailed guideline. Also, you can check Purdue OWL websites, this one, and it is very popular for our undergraduate students and graduate students, right? So you can easily check some of the very complex and complicated, style guideline from checking their websites. And in addition to that, in JOCC websites and SAGE website, we offer some brief guideline about the APA style 7th edition that we are following. So in order to check those information, you can go to our website here. So before submitting your manuscript to any journals, you have to check their guidelines. Every journal has their own guidelines, and it's very different depending on the journals, right? So once you make the decision to choose the journal that you want to submit your manuscript, then you always have to check the journal information in this journal's websites, and then check the guidelines, submission guidelines, and you have to check the page limitations and the word limitations and APA styles, informations, and other things. So if you submit if you decide to submit your paper to our JOCC journal, then you should click here, submission guidelines here, and then you can check all other information related to submissions and formattings and other things in very detail. So that's what I prepared for the talk today, and I am happy to have any discussions after this whole seminar in the discussion sections. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sun. you touched upon a very important and very foundational aspect of academic publishing, that you have to match the journal style. And that really increases the chances of your manuscript being accepted right in the first place. So thank you for that. I would now like to invite Professor Kallol Das. Kallol is Associate Professor of Marketing at MICA, Ahmedabad. Actually, Kallol and I joined the JOCC editorial team at the same time in 2017. And ever since then, Kallol has been a strong support and my ally in the success and growth of JOCC. Kallol is a person with very diverse experience. He started his career in corporate world with the likes of multinational like Caltex and Gulf Oil. Subsequently, he moved to brand and customer relationship consultancy. And after that, after 5 years in the industry, he found his true calling in academia. So he has for more than 15 years experience now in academia. His present research interests are gamified loyalty programs, mobile shopping apps, article quality, relationship marketing, meta skills, and pedagogy. Kallol has published a large number of papers in reputed international publications such as the Australian Marketing Journal, Marketing Intelligence and Planning, Journal of Marketing Education, Harvard Business School Case Studies, etc. Kallol has also written 2 books which have been very well received. So Kallol, a very warm welcome, though you are as much a host as I am, and over to you.
So thank you, Manisha, for the very generous introduction. And I'll now very briefly take you through publishing in JOCC, wherein I'll be focusing on review process and criteria. And I hope that these insights would be useful even if you're considering some other journal for publication, some other journals of similar kind. So I'll begin with the review process. The first step is the desk review process. So once you have submitted your manuscript to the SAGE submission portal, there is the initial processing which is being done by the back office team, wherein the similarity index is computed, the adherence to the submission guidelines that is been checked and all that. And if all that is good, then the submission is escalated to the editor's desk, and then the editor assigns it to an appropriate associate editor for examining it. And then the associate editor goes to the abstract, scans through the entire manuscript and checks its alignment with the aims and scope of the journal, the overall crafting, the overall rigor and all that. And depending on the outcome of this assessment, the decision would be either a reject or review. So if it's considered good enough, then it's the associate editor nominates two reviewers, and then the letters go to them, invitation letters, and then they accept this, and then the review process starts. So this takes 5, and then they get 4 weeks to go through it, and then arrive at a decision and then response. So overall, it takes 5 to 6 weeks. Sometimes it can be more, because there have been cases wherein there is this off-week paper where we are not getting enough, where the number of reviewers are very few, and the ones who are there who are busy for various reasons, and they keep declining requests. So there have been delays of that kind. These are COVID times, so there have been delays because of this factor as well. So the outcome of the review process, the first review process would be reject or revision. If the reviewers find that it's good enough for giving an opportunity to the authors, then they may recommend minor revision or major revision, and then it comes back to the authors, wherein then they are asked to, make the necessary improvements and also, provide a list of changes that they have made in response to the requirements. And then it goes back to the same reviewers who get again a period of 4 weeks to check the improvements that have been made. And if they're satisfied, then it could be accept, or if they feel that the improvements are not meeting the expectations, but then the improvements have been there, so they may give one more opportunity to the authors, and it could be a major revision again, or it could be minor revision. So the rejection levels are very high at the DEX review stage, but in the first round of review, the rejection levels are far lesser, and in the second round of review, where the manuscript has gone far ahead in the process, then the possibility of rejection is very less. It could be, there have been exceptions, of course, wherein the authors have been working on a very interesting topic, and the reviewers are excited about it. The associate editor and editor are excited, and then they give significant, but then there's a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot to be done, and they give a whole list of improvements that are needed. But then if despite 2 opportunities, they don't meet up to the expectations, then of course there is no other way apart from giving a reject decision. So the target is this, that over a span of 6 to 7 months, all these activities get over, and we intend to publish this in the online first category by that time. So that's how we have been thinking and working in the recent times. And as regards the review criteria, so I'll take you through the various assessment parameters on which each manuscript is assessed by reviewers once it clears the desk. So the first is thematic focus, wherein the reviewers on a scale of 0 to 10 check the alignment of the manuscript with the journal aims and scope, its novelty, its broad appeal, is it timely enough, and all that. So these are anyways checked by the associate editor at the desk level. But then this is a very deeper, a more refined examination of the thematic focus. So for example, there was this paper, I remember, dealing with journalistic perceptions of media loss. Now this is of course dealing with journalistic perceptions. Journalists deal with media communication, but then it's something which is to do more with legal issues rather than communication issues. There was a paper which had something to do with the Gujarati film industry and a certain Gujarati film, award-winning Gujarati film. So authors, of course, are allowed to work on niche areas, very niche topics and all that. But in order to make it through the review process, be it JOCC or some other, international journal, the authors should communicate very clearly that the insights are useful, meaningful, valuable to readers across countries. So this is something very important when it comes to deciding communicating the appeal, reflecting on the appeal of your paper. The whole thing has to be very well communicated, very well reflected first of all by the authors. This is another paper which I had the opportunity to guide and mentor as the associate editor, and published quite recently, Shahbaz Urvashi, Link Prediction, a novel approach to predict future friends in a social network. We had major problems in getting good reviewers for this paper because it was a highly mathematical paper. They had done a thorough empirical testing of their link prediction technique that they have proposed. And the reason why we were excited about this, the editor and myself and the reviewers, was its novel contribution. So novelty is very important across journals, more so in Journal of Creative Communications, because the word creative figures in our title itself. And then there was this paper which was working at the intersection of creativity and marketing, and it had a very strong futuristic orientation. This was very exciting for us. And unfortunately, when I went through this, I was quite heartbroken because it was not anchored in literature. So they were just 4 references, and then they were also not at the heart of the key arguments of the paper. Therefore, it's the second criteria is very important. Your paper has to be anchored in recent and relevant literature. And in that case, of course, the authors were given a long list of improvements that they need to do, and I hope they will work on it, and we'll have a great piece published sometime in the future. So the third important criterion, which of course will not apply for conceptual papers, but definitely at the heart of assessment of empirical papers, which is the research design and methodology, wherein the reviewers check the explanation for research design. Is it an exploratory study, or is it a descriptive study, and choice of methods? If you have used interviews, then why this? Or if you used a survey method or an experiment, why so? Why not a combination of methods, or and so on. Data analysis, it's essential that you give even the finer details of your analysis to demonstrate the rigor in your study. Talking about the reliability, the validity, all those smaller elements, the software that you have, the version that you have used, the finer elements, thematic analysis, how was it all done? If you have used that, the more you share, the more it demonstrates the rigor in your analysis, and the more it gives confidence to the reviewers about the work that you have done. And then the theoretical strength of your work. So have you used any theoretical grounding? So even if you're doing a theory building paper, you need to have 1 or 2 or more theories to ground your work so that it takes off, and then you end up with a conceptual framework. If you're doing an empirical paper, it's absolutely essential that you have you clearly use a theory or a combination of theories to give support to your to the work that you're doing. And then discussion and conclusions. So what is the contribution that your paper is making to theory, to practice? Are the conclusions clearly stated? Do they come very logically and very seamlessly from the discussion of results or the conceptual analysis that precedes the conclusion section? And then the communication. So how lucid is the writing? Is it grammatically correct? Does it it's all as per the formatting requirements and references? So I remember very recently been part of a webinar wherein the speaker, very established researcher, was saying that a very good well-crafted paper is one which can be easily understood even by a 14-year-old. So you don't don't complicate it by using difficult language. Keep it as simple as possible, and that should be enough. So so these are the factors that are used by JOCC reviewers in assessing the quality of the submissions, and same would be the case in almost all other journals. So please be mindful of that, and I'm sure these tips will be useful in developing your work, and I look forward to addressing your questions in the Q&A section. So happy researching and best wishes.
Thank you, Kallol. Thank you very much. I think this must have helped our emerging scholars, at least answer some of the questions they've had, that why is my paper not accepted? What are the things that I should have kept in mind? So taking the reviewing process further, I would like to invite Professor Rajat Roy. This is something very important that, many of us like senior academics look at reviewer process as one of our responsibilities, that is part of mentoring or part of being an editor. But Rajat is an exception here. He finds joy in reviewing and giving comments. So I think there is no better person than Rajat to address how do you respond to reviewers' comments. So Rajat is an associate professor of marketing at Bond University, Australia. In his academic career, Rajat has published in leading marketing journals like Journal of Consumer Psychology, European Journal of Marketing, Journal of Business Research, Journal of Advertising, among many others. He sits on the editorial board of Journal of Business Research, European Journal of Marketing, and International Journal of Advertising. Rajat has successfully secured grants in Australia and Japan. At the business school level, Rajat was chosen as the 2018 nominee for Vice Chancellor Research Excellence Award. He has taught a wide range of marketing subjects in Australia and in many other countries. And he has also held several academic leadership positions. So Rajat, a warm welcome and over to you now.
Thank you very much, Manisha. That was a really beautiful introduction. I feel flattered and I feel the responsibility to actually ace my presentation. So you have given me a huge responsibility. I hope I keep up to that. Just give me a few seconds. I want to share my screen. It's coming right up and everyone should be able to see my screen. Okay. So guys, as Manisha introduced, my name is Dr. Rajat Roy. I'm an associate editor for Journal of Creative Communications. That means, like Kallol said and other speakers said, I get to look at some of the papers that you send. I review them. I generally try and find the best fit with the journal. And I'm very supportive with so-called young researchers. I want to nurture them and I want to educate them about how to get published. So my tone is very positive, very encouraging, and I give a bunch of feedback. But as we know, it's really important to handle the review process. So probably I'm going to skip the next slide because Manisha has already introduced me beautifully. So I'm going to talk about how to handle the review process, which is the most important part of getting published. That's me. Now, when we talk about the review process, I generally look at as a three-step process. So I have come up with a structure in my mind. The first step being understanding the review, the second step being actioning the review, and the third step being writing a reply document. All stages are important. This is based on my research experience. This is based on my experience as an associate editor, being on the editorial review board. Everyone probably follows a generalized structure like that, but you could be creative within the overall structure. Now, my speakers before me have spoken about sending the paper to a journal, let's say Journal of Creative Communication. Now, let's say the reviewer and the editor, they like the paper, they send it to the review process. So at your end, after a month or after 5 or 6 weeks, you get an email saying, hey, Rajat, we like your paper, but there's a bunch of stuff that needs to be done. Now, in terms of an outcome, like Kallol was saying, it could be a straightaway reject, a desk reject. But my take on this is, even if it's a desk reject, don't be disheartened because desk rejection also provides you with an opportunity. The feedback that you're getting from the review process is invaluable. Based on the feedback, work on your paper, fix obvious mistake, improve its positioning. And if you reckon the paper has improved, then go for a better journal. A bit of personal anecdote and personal experience. I have been told in my publishing career that your paper is probably suitable for a conference. And then the gentleman comes back and says, hey, I have a journal. You can consider sending it to that journal. So I thanked him for his comment and feedback and everything. And I improved the paper. And ultimately, the paper was published in another A-star journal. So there's always an opportunity. So please be mindful of that. Now, there could be 3 different outcomes. Reject is obviously one of the outcomes. There could be major revision, like a revise and resubmit, or there could be a minor revision. So let me share with you guys, in my academic career over 16 years, I have never received a minor revision. It's always revise and resubmit. And I consider a revise and resubmit a very good outcome, because the journal is now saying, hey, Rajat, here is a chance. Can you improve the paper? Can you submit the paper? And it's a fair challenge. If you live up to the expectation of associate editor and the reviewer, probably you'll get published, right? So a revise and resubmit, if you receive one, give yourself a pat on the back and say, hey, I'm happy. Now I've got an opportunity to work with the paper. And remember, different journals, they present different rigor. The higher the rank of a journal, the more rigorous is the review process, right? So an opportunity is really important. It's a foot in the door. Now, once you have received the review comment in your email, go through it. And I can guarantee in most of the cases, you'll feel depressed, dejected, sad, all kinds of negative emotions you can think of. You'll think, oh my God, they've blasted my paper. I worked so hard. I came up with such a beautiful paper. Never mind, because these are the perceptions of people who have got experience and expertise in the area. So if you do not like the review comment in the first go, just glance through it and don't revisit it for the next 5-6 days. That's what I do. So after you've calmed down over the next 5-6 days, go back and read the comments carefully, this time without the underlying emotion. So read the comments objectively, right? Read the comments without your emotions, okay? We all feel emotion, towards our paper, because it's a work of creation. It's exactly like a baby. If someone says bad stuff to a baby, to our own child, we really mind. So a paper is like your baby, right? Now, when you're reading through the comment, please pay careful attention. Is that a direct comment, or is the meaning subtle? Is the meaning implied? Sometimes reviewers and associate editor, they write direct comments under the heading major comments, minor comments, and they actually tell you what to do. Change the methodology, change the literature, reword the hypothesis, right? Then it's easy. But sometimes when the comment is subtle or implied, let's say you have done a median split for your data analysis. And one of the reviewers said that median split is no longer accepted, and he pulls out a paper from a leading academic journal saying that a median split reduces statistical power. That means he's also asking you to adopt a different methodology, which could be processed. Yeah. So you have to be mindful of all those subtle things and implied things, right? I think it's quite important to understand the comments, and if there's a need, read the comments a few times, go back again and again, think, take a pause, reflect, see whether there's a connection between the comments. So if someone says that the methodology is not in order, has the other reviewer kind of repeated that? Has the associate editor repeated that? There's also a need to understand what are the common problems that cuts across different reviewer comments. Is the common problem around, your positioning? Is the common problem around your literature review, right? So that's really important to understand. Now, when I say common patterns of feedback, you'll find the associate editor actually does a great job by summing up the review from individual reviewers. So the associate editor almost acts like the adjudicator, right? So metaphorically speaking, that means the associate editor tells, hey, Rajat, look at the comments, but I think these comments are really important to improve your paper, right? And you should address them. But it doesn't mean that you're not addressing other comments. You have to address every comment from every reviewer, including the associate editor. But the associate editor makes a good summary, gives a good overall picture what your paper is deficient about, right? Now, if the comments have not been classified into major, minor, positive, negative, right? Most of the time reviewers and associate editors, they do that. In that case, what you can do, you create your own classification, okay? Major issues, minor issues, okay? Positive comment, negative comment, right? Yeah, because if you have a positive comment, you can use the positive comment to further strengthen your paper. And sometimes I pitch positive comment from another reviewer to argue my case to a second reviewer. For example, if someone says that in your methodology, the process you have followed, looks interesting, yeah, I'll use that comment to build my case, who has challenged another reviewer if he or she has challenged my methodology, right? So understand and classify the comments. So this is my step one, understanding the review, okay? The second step is actioning the review. Now, preparing an action plan. In most of our cases, we actually do research with other collaborators, okay? Co-researcher, we call them co-researcher. And I know some of you could be very clever, you could be doing your own research, but most of the cases we do joint research. So what I do at my end, when I get a review comment, which comes from associate editor, 3 reviewers or 2 reviewers, depending on the journal, I simply open up a Word document and then I copy and paste all the review comments on that Word document, right? And I say this Word document is a living document, meaning you update it from time to time, right? Now, against each and every review comment, okay, we try and prepare a line of action, okay, meaning how we are going to address those comments. For example, again, if someone has said medium split is not acceptable, I copy and paste the comment, then I say, think about an alternative process model 7, okay? If someone says that, you know, your research lacks internal validity, I put a comment, maybe run an experiment. If someone says, you know, your research lacks realism, okay, I'll say maybe run a field experiment. And this line of action has to be prepared in consultation with all your co-researcher. So once we prepare the document, circulate it amongst co-researcher, let them also contribute. So it should be a mutually agreed document having a common plan of action to deal with, you know, the paper in the most constructive way, okay? Now, when you start revising your paper, please follow this plan of action. Please follow the plan of action. So once you have a plan of action and a document which is agreed on by all the researchers and co-researcher, right? Next thing you do is initiate your work in the manuscript, okay? Now, my understanding is that people have different strengths. So some people could be very good in writing literature, finding theory. Some people have very strong analytical skills. Some people could be very good at copy editing. Some people could be good at designing studies, experiment, running survey. So whatever that strength may be, please play to your strength. So for example, if I'm good at finding theory, so Rajat, under that in a document where you have a plan of action, you mention my name, literature review, Rajat. Prepare a table with literature review, Rajat. You know, build a hypothesis leading to H1 or H2, Rajat, okay? So play to your strength. Now, some of our speakers have already told you that how important is theory. So theoretical lens is absolutely important, right? Because theory provides us the lens to understand the phenomena and understand your research questions and hypotheses, right? So we say it should be grounded in theory. Now, theory should be current. Theory should be up to date. So please ensure that you haven't missed any paper. For example, in many of the papers I have been publishing in recent times, a common trend has been, could you create a literature review table? Could you summarize different papers from the field in a table and also list your paper? So it does 2 things. It shows you that you have a strategic way to upgrade your literature review. It also shows you how you have positioned your paper. So what's your contribution of your paper vis-a-vis all other papers which have been published in the field, okay? So theoretical lens, absolutely important. And if there is a chance, rewrite the theory. If you think reviewers have given critical feedback around theory, please use that opportunity to rewrite the theory, to strengthen the theory. From what I know in marketing, if we don't have a solid theory up front, there's a huge chance of getting your paper rejected. You know, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you something. You know, like anyone else, I struggled during the initial phase of my career. I used to send 1 or 2 papers and wait, hey, they never got accepted. I used to get sad. Now, please change your strategy. Love, you know, what you do. Love your research. So now I send out 10 papers, and out of 10 papers, I can guarantee 8 paper gets rejected, but I get chance, revise and resubmit 2 papers, right? So with those 2 papers, I work very hard and turn them around. With those 8 papers which get rejected, I take on the comment on board, change the paper, reposition it, and send it to another journal, right? Now, most common problems around review, and even in my experience as associate editor of JOCC, the first problem is positioning. Remember, our previous speaker was talking about introduction. So in your introduction, you position your paper. So when I say positioning, I say how you address extend research gaps. Most of the time, the authors write, hey, not enough research has been done before. Just because not enough research has been done before is not a significant reason to do research. You do research to understand the phenomena, to answer a research question, but also to extend theoretical domain. So in the positioning, in the introduction, probably in 3rd or 4th paragraph, you should explicitly articulate what theoretical gaps you're addressing. And you should also revisit those theoretical gaps in the theoretical contribution section towards the end, right? So most common problem positioning, think about a reviewer, think about an associate editor. The first thing that you read is the introduction. Is the introduction interesting enough? Does it make it curious? Does it make it want me to read the rest of the paper? So your introduction is like a pitch. The common problem lies around introduction, theoretical grounding, and of course, methodology, the examples I've given. So moving on with actioning the review. Okay, once you have started making those changes in the paper, okay, circulate the paper amongst your co-author. Ensure those changes are effective. Ensure that you have addressed every reviewer comment satisfactorily in the best possible way, in the tightest possible way. If you're not sure, go back to the drawing board and work again, but give them no chance. Make it watertight. Make your arguments watertight. So once you have changed things in the manuscript, now start creating a response document. So the first cut of response document will be pretty much a preliminary document. So write whatever you want to based on the changes you've done in the paper, your preliminary impression, how you change the paper, how you improve the paper, okay? So once you write your responses, you will also feel there's a need to go back to the main manuscript and change again. You know why? Because the evolving process. Maybe you read another paper, maybe you got a better theory, or maybe you understood it all wrong. Maybe your understanding after the review process is better. So based on that, you have to do back and forth, change the paper, change the response document, or writing the response document, you come up with something like a new idea, then change the paper back and forth, right? So whatever you do, implement these changes in the response document or in the manuscript in consultation with the co-authors. It's a constructive process. Please remember, guys, people have different personality. There would be personality clash, but remember, you're in this together. So I always tell my co-author, I do not mind, if my idea doesn't get accepted, in the mutual consultation process. My ultimate goal, my ultimate objective is to get the paper accepted, and that's a mutually agreed common goal we should be all working towards. And please remember, make the feedback, even when you're giving feedback to your own co-researcher, make it constructive process. So that's what I mean by actioning the review. The next stage, which is really important, really important, is drafting the response document. Remember, in the meantime, you have already started preparing a response document based on the changes you have made in the manuscript. So in the response document, the first thing that you do is create a response to the associate editor or editor-in-chief, right? It's really important. And this is where I find lots of papers in JOCC, it is actually resubmitted without considering associate editor responses. Remember, associate editor may have the power, if he or she thinks that you have done a good job, to overrule a reviewer, right? So associate editor almost, I repeat, works like an adjudicator, right? So if there is a clash between two reviewers, the associate editor can say, let's say it's 1 versus 1. One says accept, one says reject. So the associate editor can pitch in and saying, hey, this is a paper which you like. This is a paper which got a solid theoretical contribution. So the associate editor can say yes, and your paper can go through. So in the letter to the associate editor, please create a summary of changes, the significant changes, the most important changes. For example, if you've collected new data, please highlight that. If you have done new analysis, please highlight that, okay? Please also demonstrate in a summary that how you have improved the paper significantly, meaning, what are the changes you have made, where you have made those changes, and how those changes have actually improved the paper. Please remember to link your reply to the associate editor to the replies they've given to individual reviewer. For example, you say, dear Rajat, these are the changes I have done. As mentioned in a reply to reviewer 1, we have reanalyzed the data and we have implemented process. And the findings are pretty much consistent, aligned with our hypothesis, right? So associate editor, a summary reply, highlighting key changes, highlighting key points, and wherever necessary, link those replies to associate editor to individual responses. Now, it also means you have to respond and articulate your changes to individual reviewer very thoroughly, in a very watertight, in a very succinct way, in a very effective way, in a very persuasive way, right? But please remember, be polite and respectful to all reviewers, including associate editor, editor-in-chief. The reason being, the reviewers, they do a service by reviewing this paper, right? So they have the usual job, like you and me. They teach, they research. On top of that, they're reviewing. And it's possible reviewers may have, although you try to match a reviewer background with the paper, but reviewers have different sort of expertise. For example, I'm an expert in experimental design and consumer behavior. Some people could have expertise in big data. Sometimes you have some theoretical expertise, right? So it is possible a reviewer may or may not comprehend, although it's highly unlikely, Sometimes, I'm saying only sometimes, they may or may not comprehend your theory. It could be a function of the way you're written. See, the point is, it could be clear on your mind, but when you try and articulate it, it's not clear. So if that's the case, please say, I'm sorry, we have actually rephrased it, so that you can understand this better, right? So please maintain a very polite tone. Please address all the points made by the reviewer. Now, I'm saying you do not have to agree to the reviewer always. For example, if you know that your stimulus or your experimental design or the survey you've created, okay, is based on previous scientific research, published paper, please be polite and refute. Give a very strong counter argument why you have followed that methodology, right? That's okay, right? Now, while writing the responses, I highly recommend you write the responses a few times. Typically, if the review is not favorable, people tend to get overwhelmed with their emotions. And the first response you write might not come across as polite. It may come across as sharp, but non-polite. Okay. So probably once you have written the first draft, you go back. It's a continuous process. You go back, you revise it, revise the paper, revise the reply document, circulate it amongst your co-researcher. They should help you to tone down, to make it more polite. But definitely, once you're past your emotional stage, go and revisit and go and rewrite those responses. Okay. Now, in the response document, please make obvious what are the changes you made in the main manuscript. Kindly refer to those changes by page number. Please highlight the text in the main manuscript, maybe in blue color. Again, reviewers are very busy people. They may or may not have the time to read the whole paper. Again, the point is, if they have given you feedback, it's your responsibility to address those feedback sharply and point the reviewers that, yes, these are the changes I've made on specific page numbers. They are highlighted. So you're providing them with a structure and the reason and the logic how you have handled the review process, right? Right. Now, let's hope everything is ready. Your manuscript looks watertight. Your response document looks watertight. Your job is still not done. Now, circulate it amongst your co-researcher. Give it a reread. Check for consistency. Check for consistency in argument. Don't self-contradict yourself. Check for typos like errors. Okay. Now, reviewers may pick up on a typo and say, hey, the authors do not have the time to fix any typo. Yeah, that means they're not serious enough. These are heuristics. This could be a thumb rule, but why take the chance? So please make sure that you have addressed everything, errors, language. If you're not a native speaker, you may like to copy edit the paper, right? For example, for better language improvement flow and all the stuff. And this is what I do. For example, I write 10 papers on pricing and advertising. Sometimes I'm a single person who's writing the paper, right? So there could be a similarity in my writing. I'm writing 10 papers, although I try to differentiate. So you may like to use a software to do a similarity check and probably address those issues upfront. The journal does it at its end, but it never hurts. You do a similar process. For example, run your paper through Turnitin or whatever software you fancy to make it watertight. Okay. So if everything goes fine, you have done your final check, please go ahead and resubmit your paper, your response document, and then you give yourself a pat on the back and you say, yay, fingers crossed, let's hope for the best outcome. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajat. I think in that brief presentations, there were so many valuable lessons. So thank you for that. Next, I would like to invite Kirsten Thorson. Professor Thorson is an associate professor in the Department of Advertising and Public Relations in the Michigan State University, USA. Her research explores the role of digital and social media in promoting or hindering political engagement. Her recent research projects have investigated political use of Facebook, the spread of climate change communication on social media, and the contribution of media use in shifting conceptions of politics among young adults. Kirsten has published more than 60 papers in highly reputed journals, such as Communication Theory, Information Communication and Society, Journal of Communication, and many more. And her work has been widely cited. Kirsten is also very good at collaborating on various papers. So, as they say that working is very important, but networking is equally important. So Is here to share her insights about how to build scholarly networks. Welcome to you, Kirsten, and over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me as part of this amazing webinar. I've been publishing papers for a while, but I think I'm still learning great tips, so I really appreciate hearing everyone's insights. So I want to talk just for a very few minutes about building your scholarly network. And actually, as Manisha was introducing me, I was thinking how many ways our scholarly networks become valuable to us, right? And my being here is because I know Manisha and we connect, and we've been able to stay connected over the years as well as to the other associate editors. And I think thinking about your own scholarly networks as having really rich benefits, not only for you yourself, but also for the other people in your networks. So when I think about why our scholarly networks matter, early in your career, you can think about mentorship. That is reaching out to more senior scholars who are willing to work with you. And oftentimes, when you are working on the same topic as someone else, they're genuinely excited to provide you with some mentorship to help you move your work forward and make your work part of the scholarly conversation. And then the other amazing part of it is that as you move forward in your career, you become a mentor. And I think all of us here are starting to be in those positions and really enjoy the opportunity to share what we've learned with all of you to make sure that you're able to move your work forward as well. But scholarly networks also matter because it is typically through our networks that our work gets noticed. I remember when I was in grad school, I believed that there was just some magical meritocracy in academia where you would just do good work and then everyone would have read it and they would cite it. And if you just did hard enough work, if you just did a good enough job, that people would read that work and they would make use of it in their own work. But of course, as it turns out, in the real world, there are so many thousands of us, even on just a narrow topic that perhaps you work on. There are so many people doing good work and so many journals that actually you have to do some work to make sure that your work gets noticed, to make sure that the people who are ready to engage with it, who are ready to learn from you, have the opportunity to see that work. And so that's what I'll talk about here for a second. And then the other reason your networks matter is, I think most of us, we don't want to get citations just to get citations like they're money or something, but rather because we do research because we want to be part of the scholarly conversation, part of this long, hundreds of years trajectory of scholars talking to each other and arguing with each other in a really productive way so that we're building knowledge over time. And so if you want to be part of the scholarly conversation, then it's important that you build the networks of the people who can help you do that. But I want to say off the bat, and this is something that I also didn't realize when I was in graduate school, that scholarly networks are not equitable. They're not open equally to everyone. And we now know that citation rates, for example, are uneven between men and women, for example, or between scholars who come from different parts of the world. And I think there's a really exciting opportunity right now to change that. And a lot of the tools that we use now to connect with our scholarly networks give opportunities to people to be part of conversations they couldn't be part of before. And so I hope that as you all are moving through your careers, that you are thinking about how do we change this? How do we, in our everyday practices, do things that make sure that we create more equitable visibility for different people's work? And that I think of that in my own life. Just even how do you search for articles? As we heard, you need to have this updated sort of literature review and theory. Well, how do you search for articles? Most of the search engines we use show you highly cited work much, much earlier than work that hasn't been seen as much. And so how can you think about ways to build into your own everyday practices, seeking out new work and being the person who spots a really exciting new paper and bring that into the scholarly conversation? So who can be part of your network? I think, one of the most important sets of people who can be part of your network are scholars who you are talking with in your work. So if you look at the scholars that you cite, of course, there'll be some sort of classics, right, that we're all citing that were written quite a while ago, and maybe those people aren't going to be your best friends. But there's a lot of scholars who are at the same time working on similar problems to you. I think it's really important that you become connected with them. And because I think, it's easy to think of scholarship and publication as sort of a competition, but in reality, it's not. Most of us are in this business because we're really excited about the opportunity to generate ideas collaboratively with other people. And so building connections with scholars you are talking with in your work can be really important. At the same time, and I think these networks work quite differently, your colleagues and mentors are really important. Even oftentimes your colleagues, your graduate school colleagues or your early career colleagues, maybe they don't do the same kind of work as you. They don't work on the same topics necessarily, but they may be very, very, very excited to make sure that you see opportunities that can help you move forward. I think in my own career, the value of my horizontal networks, that is the people that I went to graduate school, the people who have moved through their careers with me, have been invaluable in terms of figuring out what journals to publish in, or really surfacing a lot of the ideas that we've talked about here today. I think a lot of us learned them not from formal mentorship, but rather from talking to each other and really trying to figure out through other people's experiences where we could be. And one thing that I think is so, so important is that your colleagues and mentors and you, that we think about these networks from the position of generosity, right? That it's not, we don't just enter into scholarly networks to get something from them, but because we want to give something back to them. And when you enter into these networks with that sort of motivation, I think it really makes you think differently about how you talk about your work, about how you solicit feedback for your work, about the time and space that you make in your life to give feedback to other people as well. And then, of course, part of your network, and increasingly with digital media, you can make the broader fields in which you work part of your network. That is to say, think about outside of your own perhaps really narrow focused area of expertise, there's a wider net of people who are probably really interested in what you have to say. And so thinking creatively over the course of your career about creative ways to become part of those broader field conversations can be really valuable as well. So how do we build networks? I think some of these ideas are really obvious, but I just want to reinforce them because oftentimes we don't take advantage of them. And I am guilty of this. Oftentimes I get very shy about reaching out to people in some of these contexts. So I want to affirm the idea that these are things that you can do. Of course, going to scholarly conferences, but I think maybe related to your topic. Oftentimes, it takes a lot of effort to see those workshops being advertised or to find small pots of grant funding that can make you able to go to those networks. But it's really, really valuable to do that work because it's through those spaces that you build personal connections. And of course, we know the scholarly life is not just about sitting alone in a room, like typing on a computer. A lot of it is about the informal conversations that we have with scholars and with each other and sort of ideas that emerge from that process. So for me, some of the most important connections I've built in my career have been through informal interactions at a coffee shop, for example, during a conference, or even just happening to sit down next to somebody and get to talking because you're in the same field. I would also say that as I have moved forward in my career, increasingly, before a conference, junior scholars will reach out and say, hey, could I sit down with you? I'd like to talk about this paper I'm working on, or I'd like to talk about this project. I love that. And I want to say to you that if you're going to a conference and you look through the program and you say, oh, wow, these two people are working on something that's really related to what I'm doing, or I read that person's paper, I really want to talk to them about how they did that kind of work. Reach out to them. We love to hear from people who want to talk to us about our work, because one of the secrets of academic life is, once you move on in your career, you go to a lot of meetings, you help organize things like this, but actually you don't have that many opportunities anymore to really sit down with someone who's excited about the same set of ideas as you are. So please, please, please always feel comfortable reaching out to people that you want to connect with. Another thing you can do is email. Share your paper drafts with selected scholars. I would say don't blanket the field. So that is, don't send your email out to like 50 people saying, hey, could you all read my paper? But you can start to slowly build connections with a set of people who might be willing to provide you with some feedback. Be prepared that some people won't write you back. Be prepared that someone might write you back and say, I think this is really exciting, but I don't have time to engage with it right now. But then be prepared that sometimes someone will write you back. And this has happened to me in ways that have benefited me to such an extent. Sometimes people write you back this long, amazing email that really changes the trajectory, maybe not even of your paper, but just of the whole research agenda. And so there can be really amazing small moments that emerge out of your efforts to connect with scholars in this way. And then in addition, propose collaborations. I think especially there's a lot of emphasis increasingly on international comparative types of work. And it's hard to find collaborators sometimes outside of your typical networks. And those networks are often locked into national spaces, national institutions, national types of conferences. So think about the ways in which you might have access to data set or interest in collecting data that would really connect and help someone else move their work forward. And I think I've been trying to do that more and more, and to find those kinds of opportunities and reach out and say, hey, no worries if you don't want to do this, but I have this data set, or I have an opportunity to do interviews with 20 people in my community. Is that a project that you would be interested in doing? And then, of course, increasingly, can be troublesome, but also sometimes the tool of the not so powerful, the digital media platforms. I really suggest that if you haven't already, that you get to know academic Twitter or whatever the social media are where people are discussing your field and topic. I think it really varies in terms of your subfield and your sub area where those people are, but you should be able to find them. There'll be hashtags, there'll be sort of, people who are big names on Twitter who you can follow and start to listen into those kinds of conversations. I am not the world's best Twitter user, but I make sure that I do it to the extent where I want to make sure that I'm part of the conversations when they're related to the work that I do. So the way I think it's a good way to start by doing that is connect with and promote the work of others. That is, lead with generosity. Enter into these network spaces by trying to retweet other people's work, or to say, hey, I read your paper, I thought that was really interesting, or reply to someone's thread about some interesting thing they did and said, I really got a lot out of this. And it really makes a difference in terms of people's willingness to connect with you. And then also share your work, including, and this is really important, a short summary of the paper. So I think oftentimes we're shy, right? We don't want to say, hey, look at me, look how great my paper is. And so we just say, here's a link to my new paper. And that's fine, but busy people are busy people, and we see, right, hundreds of things moving through our social media feeds. So take the time to write a 2 or 3 sort of short summary tweet thing about what your paper is and how it contributes to the world. Don't get all caught up in the nitty-gritty details. The people who want to know that will read the paper, but try to frame it in a way that a larger audience can make sense of and understand. And you'll be surprised. Sometimes you'll be ignored, but sometimes you'll find an audience, and people who might not have read your work will actually find it. And that, of course, then leads to more opportunities, and more capacity to contribute to the overall scholarly conversation. So when your paper is accepted, so if you've gone through all of these processes, JOCC, or it's another journal that you're working with, when your paper is accepted, I think it's really important to think strategically about how to make sure people hear about your paper. So typically you can ask your own institution if they would write a press release, or if you could write a press release and perhaps they could edit it. Sometimes offering to do a little bit of the work will really help. Ask if they would be willing to let them know you have a new paper, and ask if they would be willing to promote that on their social media. You can also ask the journal, do they use Twitter or Facebook, or do they have a blog? So as you know, our journal is quite active on social media, and help the journal think about the best way to promote your work. Because oftentimes the journal might not even have as good of connections to your scholarly conversation as you do. So you want to think strategically about how to make sure that all the institutions you're connected to can help you promote that work. And then, of course, when your paper is accepted, think about preparing that Twitter thread or a Facebook post or wherever it is that you think your scholarly community will be most likely to see it. And then think about 3 to 5 people to whom you might email your paper. So to my earlier point, send them a personal note, right? Write to me if it's about a topic that is relevant to me. Write to me and say, hey, I know you're working on X, or I liked your paper on Y. I just wrote a paper that's kind of relevant to that. I'd love for you to take a look at it. If you have any feedback, let me know. And even if they don't write you back, you know that they've received that paper. And that's one more sort of connection, one more way in which your name has started to get out there. So finally, I just want to leave with one more time to say, I think the power of our scholarly networks really is much greater when we enter them with a sense of generosity. And that is to say, promote the work of others even before you yourself are a more senior scholar. If you loved someone's paper, let them know. That makes people's day. Send them an email or connect with them on social media and let them know that their paper meant something to you. If you hear about a grant or a special issue of our journal or another journal that's a good fit for your colleague or for someone you know, let them know, right? Make sure that you are one of the people who's connecting people with other kinds of opportunities. And the last thing is nominate yourself and other people for awards. One of the secrets of winning awards is that most of the time, the person who won the award nominated themselves or they asked someone to nominate them, because that's how the process secretly actually works. And so part of that generosity is for you to say to someone else, hey, I love your work. Can we make sure it becomes visible for this award? So again, thank you all for having me and for including me. And I hope we have time to talk about any of these kinds of things going forward. And thank you all for being here.
Thanks very much, Christine. And I would reinforce the point that Christine made, that JOCC welcomes all contributions, that emerge from international collaborations. In fact, we value them very much. So go ahead, make those collaborations and share the work with us. So that was the JOCC editorial team for you. As you can see, we all come from a nurturing mindset. And our purpose is to help emerging scholars do well in their publishing journey. So next we have Ms. Devi Dar, and Devi is representing SAGE. So this is that rare combination when the editorial team comes together with the representatives from the publisher. So welcome, Debbie. I'll introduce you, and then you can share all the information that you have from SAGE for everyone.
Yes,
so
sure.
Is a commissioning editor in the journals team at SAGE India. She did her MA in English Literature from Miranda House, Delhi University, and she has almost a decade's experience in publishing. She has worked with major publishing houses such as Pearson Education, Paragon Publishing, and in diverse profiles. She's currently the journal's commissioning in charge. She has worked in textbooks, trade books, encyclopedias, coffee table books, and illustrated fiction books. And now she is currently handling academic journals for the last 3.5 years, which includes humanities and social sciences, STM medical, and Bhasha Hindi journals. So that's quite a diverse experience and background. So welcome, Debbie. Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Shilak, for that wonderful introduction. And I'll be shortly sharing my screen. Just please hold on for a moment. Can you all see my screen? So welcome everyone. Like Professor Shelat introduced me already earlier, I'm Debbie from the journals team at SAGE India. Obviously, most of the basics for how to get published, from a manuscript to a successful journal publication has been covered by our esteemed editors earlier. So I will now be taking you all through some key points, reinforcing many of the points that were shared earlier while giving a publisher perspective. There will also be some tips and resources that I will refer to, which you can, check out. And this will help you in your quest for a successful article publication. If you all have any questions, I and of course the entire JOCC team will all take them at the end during the Q&A session. So I'm giving a quick intro to SAGE Publishing. As you can see, we are the largest independent academic publisher, owned by the founder, Sarah Miller McCune, founded in 1965, with 2,000 employees, 1,000 plus journals, out of which 150 plus are gold OA journals, open access, tie-ups with 400 plus societies, 800 plus books, and we have online products such as SAGE Business Cases, SAGE Video, etc. In fact, I'd also like to point out that as of now, we have about 64 journals in the discipline of communication and media studies, in which, of course, Journal of Creative Communications is, part of this entire list. So we have a diverse, like a big list of communication journals here. Here, I'm giving you a quick idea of the kind of prestigious and key societies whose journals are being published by SAGE. and with whom we have had long-term collaborations, such as Indian Council of World Affairs. Then there is IIM Lucknow, IIM Ahmedabad, Anthropological Survey of India, and of course, MICA, the School of Ideas, whose official journal publication, Journal of Creative Communications, is brought out by SAGE. It is the Scopus and an ESCI index journal, which you all have already heard about, whose prestigious editorial team is here for this event. And of course, you've all received their valuable inputs this time. Now I'm starting on, the main presentation from my end. Here I will be giving a broad overview of the publishing process. As you can see, this chart illustrates the timeline of a typical author journey. So starting from the early stages of securing funding, conducting research, and going on to publication. So you secure your funding, conduct research, write your article, submit it, it goes through peer review, then it can go through revisions or resubmissions, and finally acceptance. After that, there is online publication, then there's print publication, and then you promote your article. Then the cycle starts again, with another new submission. Now, coming to the first step, preparing for submission. Here, once you decide to which journal you'd like to submit, spend some time reading the manuscript submission guidelines, as already specified earlier, by Professor Wong, that the submission guidelines for that particular journal are very, very important, and you'd need to follow them. We cannot emphasize enough how much editors appreciate the effort you put in while following the guidelines. If you do not follow them, there's a large chance your paper might be unsubmitted, and sent back for adjustments before even being considered. Of course, read the aims and scope of the journal and tailor your manuscript accordingly. Make sure to include in your submission funding, conflict of interest, and ethics statements, even if you have nothing to declare. Now, as you're going through the submission checklist, make a note if you're adhering to the journal's specific requirements, such as word limits. As rightly mentioned earlier, in JOCC, for example, research articles have a defined word limit of 6,000 to 8,000 words. Then check if you've used the right reference style. For instance, there are different styles such as Harvard, APA, AMA, Vancouver, or Chicago style. JOCC specifically uses an APA reference style. If the journal has defined the the article structure to follow, again, please modify accordingly. There may also be specific requirements such as formatting, numbering in relation to tables and figures, or guidance on title, abstract, and keywords. Of course, now coming on to the next point, you also need to ensure that there are no identifying features in your manuscript to facilitate blind peer review. For example, in JOCC's case, it follows double-blind peer review. So please make sure that in the actual manuscript, there are no identifying features, such as if there are acknowledgements or something like that, you can just mention, you've anonymized the acknowledgements or, shared it separately. Also ask yourself, have you, obtained permission for all copyrighted material from other sources? Do a plagiarism check to ensure all material is properly referenced, cited, and permissions taken. You can use, if available, your institution's plagiarism checking software, or use any of the free services available on the web. Ask yourself that whether you need to include supplemental material to your submission, like data sets or audio recording. Will it add value to the content? You can also prepare a cover letter, if applicable, for the journal. And lastly, but not the least, please proofread it before submitting it. In case you're not confident about proofreading it on your own, you can use services such as Sage Miles. It's a manuscript improvement and language editing service, available on sagemiles.com. So all authors can access it, and there are different kinds of services that you can opt for, such as copy editing, developmental editing, typesetting, proofreading, project management. And this service is available irrespective of the journal you finally submit your article to. So you can all use such, author services. Now coming to helping readers find your article. So as rightly said earlier, if no one reads your findings, what is the use of disseminating your research? So you have to help them find your article with a well-written title and abstract. Keywords, of course, are still important in optimizing the discoverability of your article. So to maximize the SEO or search engine optimization and gain traction, it's important to choose these keywords carefully. Include your keywords if possible in your title and abstract, repeat the most important ones where appropriate and without losing the natural flow of the language. It's also key to keep in mind what users are going to be typing into Google while looking for your article. So with a strong title, abstract keyword, you're set, and there's more chance for your work to be discovered, read, and cited. I'd like to add, just to make this more relatable, it's simpler. I mean, it's similar to what we do for Facebook or Twitter. For any informal posts, we always provide hashtags to make our post discoverable. It's exactly the same thing which you need to do here with help of keywords for your scholarly article publication. Now, rules to follow to submit your manuscript. Again, do make sure that you only submit to one journal at a time. Send in your manuscript via the online manuscript submission system, which is Sage Track Sage as applicable for JOCC, or the applicable journal editor's email ID. And of course, follow the steps outlined in the platform. So this is very, very important. Coming to common mistakes to avoid. So it's possible, editors for some journals might not even take a look at your manuscript for, several reasons. Though I think JOCC team is pretty, supportive, and they do try to mentor you all. But it is not necessarily the case that with every journal that you submit to, the editors will entertain you if you're not thoroughly reviewing the submission guidelines. Then, for example, if there is incorrect formatting of tables and figures, you have to, then you might, get desk rejected, outright. If the topic is not an appropriate fit for the journal as per the aim and scope, so this is a complete no-no. This obviously will not allow your journal to move, article to move further. Submitting the wrong manuscript type, for example, you submit a research paper for a case journal, and of course, poor grammar or syntax. So these are the mistakes, common mistakes that can that occur that we've noticed, and it's best to avoid them. If you have, again, like I mentioned earlier, if you require any, help with respect to language, you can always, avail these language editing services out there. Coming to the overall peer review process, this was, of course, very comprehensively covered earlier by Professor Kallol earlier. So majority of Sage journals use the platform Sage Track. So once a paper is submitted, the editor determines if it fits within the journal's scope. You can find the aims and scope, of course, on the journal website. If the paper does not fit within the aims and scope, or perhaps it recently published a paper on this topic, or there are initial fatal flaws, so the paper could be desk rejected. If it passes the initial checklist, then it moves on to the next stage of peer review, where paper is sent out to at least 2 reviewers. Reviewers assess and make recommendations to the editor, which has these 4 possible outcomes: rejection, accept with major revisions, accept with minor revisions, and accept and publish. Finally, editor makes the final decision on the paper. Please know that peer review, of course, takes time. Reviewers spend hours on each manuscript, diligently reviewing papers in his or her field, as the editors had mentioned earlier as well. So in fact, we encourage everyone to, consider peer reviewing papers and giving back to the research community. You can all go and register yourself on a website called Publons, which ensures that you have a verified, peer review history recorded through your Publons profile. So, that would be a good initiative if you all take it up. Now, congratulations, your paper has been accepted. It is a point to celebrate, but the work doesn't stop there. Now, the next steps of the process start with the involvement of the production teams at Sage. This is the point when the papers reach the publishing house. So upon acceptance, you will sign the contributor agreement before the appropriate materials are sent over to a production team. The article starts out by going through copy editing and typesetting. You will then have another chance to review your article in its final proof form, which is author review. The editor might review your article as well at this stage, which is editor review. And once all the edits are compiled, a new proof is generated. Then the article will be published online ahead of print, which what Sage calls online first publication. This means your article is fully discoverable and readers can already download and cite your work, even if it is not yet placed in a print issue. And the next stage is issue publication, where print version is sent to press and the online issue is published with both versions now available to subscribers. Finally, the PDF of the published article is sent to the corresponding author, providing author access. Of course, now it's time to celebrate and share your findings with the world. You'll want to be sure you promote your article to drive downloads and citations. I believe Professor Thorson has already covered most of these points here. So I'll just quickly take you through this. You can share on social media. You can share on relevant blogs and scholarly communication networks like ResearchGate. You can notify your colleagues and peers. And of course, you can also consider issuing a press release via your institution. There are also a number of SAGE guides which are available on the website, on how to promote your article. So please feel free to check them out. Coming to preprint submissions. So in case you are not quite ready to submit to a peer-reviewed journal and instead would like to quickly disseminate your research to your colleagues in your field and gather feedback, there is another option available. There are numerous preprint servers you can submit to based on the kind of research you do. Preprints are websites that allow you to upload the first version of your manuscript and gather general feedback from your peers immediately. Please note, preprint servers are not peer-reviewed and do not provide copy editing and formatting, but allow quick dissemination of work before publishing your work in a peer-reviewed academic journal, and allows to immediately have a record of you being the first one to conduct that particular research. SAGE has its own preprint server for humanities and social sciences called Advanced. So the main benefits are confidence for a first-time author. It's openly available, open access research, free server, record or credit of first-time research. Potential collaborations can happen more quickly, feedback from a wider network. And also it's more inclusive. It can allow for null or negative results to be recorded as well. Coming to additional tips. So I'd like to reiterate that publishing with a company like SAGE means you as an author benefit from the highest production standards. And you also get a range of publishing models to choose from. So for example, if you are publishing your article in the journal of your choice, and then you have an institutional requirement to make it open access, and the journal is actually a traditional subscription journal where content is behind a paywall, so you can explore the SAGE Choice program. So then your article can be made open access under a Creative Commons license after paying a certain article processing charge under the SAGE Choice program. So you can all explore that. Otherwise, of course, there are open access journals, as applicable. You can submit to those as well, and which may or may not charge an APC depending upon the journal. Then you can also consider creating a profile on ORCID and Publons. I had already mentioned Publons earlier. ORCID is actually a website where, if you go and register yourself, it will give you a unique and persistent digital identifier as an author, which will not allow your author profile to be confused with other authors who share the same name as you, and will help you keep a record of all your publications through that profile. In fact, our submission platform SAGE Track prompts every author to link or create an ORCID profile while registering, and sometimes even mandatorily collects ORCID IDs of corresponding authors for many journals. So we encourage all aspiring authors to go right away and create an ORCID profile. You can also check out this third-party site called thinkchecksubmit.org, which is a ready reference tool to identify trustworthy journals and publishers. So in this day and age of predatory journals and publishing, this website helps by posing a list of questions to you as part of a checklist to identify trustworthy journals. Questions include such as, do you or your colleagues know the journal? Have you read the articles before? Can you easily identify and contact the publisher? Does it identify which kind of peer review it uses? Are articles indexed or not? What fees is charged? Is the publisher part of a recognized industry initiative like COPE, Committee on Publication Ethics, and so on and so forth. Coming to the next point here, I'm talking of a SAGE, site, which is called the Journal Recommender. We have recently released it. It's actually in its beta stage. So this is to help authors identify the right SAGE journal according to the subject area of your article. So how does the Journal Recommender work? You can just enter your manuscript title and keywords, after going online, and just hit find journals. you will have the option to filter by subject or indexing and journal type. So once you have the list of journals there, you can click on each journal to view the key journal information, which is what I think Professor Hong was also referring to in context to JOCC. So check out the journal information and the description, aims and scope and submission guidelines, and accordingly you can go and submit to the journal. Coming to the next point here, in case you all have an institutional subscription to SAGE research methods, you can go ahead and explore it. So it's a great starting point for young researchers and provides a hoard of resources to refer to even while starting it. It supports research at all levels by providing material to guide users through every step of the research process. Nearly everyone at a university, as you're all aware, from students learning how to conduct research to faculty conducting research for publication, everybody is involved in research at some way or the other. So SAGE Research Methods has the answer for each user group, from quick dictionary definitions to case study examples and even video tutorials. So it covers the entire gamut. Finally, you can all avail this free online course on how to get published on SAGE campus. There are other courses available there as well, but those would be available if you have a subscription to SAGE campus. But this one is completely free. So there's a how to get published course there, and you can just go and register yourself and the trial would start anyway. Lastly, coming to the SAGE Author Gateway, it is SAGE's dedicated space for author support. You can visit the website for author FAQs and additional how to get published resources. There will be more resources, tips and tricks on writing and research as well. Also outlined is which version of your paper you can share and where and when you can do that, and other details as well. So you can all check this out there. That's all for today from my end. Thank you, everybody, and good luck getting published, of course.
Thank you very much, Debbie. I'm so glad that SAGE is really offering a wealth of resources to scholars out there, and I think all of us should make use of these wonderful resources. So before we move to your questions and answers, I would like to invite Professor Varsha Jain for her closing remarks. Professor Varsha is a professor of integrated marketing communication at MICA, and she co-chairs our doctoral level program, FPM. And Varsha has in her career mentored several emerging scholars. She has over 18 years of experience in teaching and research, have authored more than 100 publications in journals and other venues. She is published in journals such as European Journal of Marketing, International Journal of Information Management, Journal of Business Research, Journal of Product and Brand Management, Journal of Consumer Marketing, and so on. She has also contributed case studies to Ivy and Emerald Emerging Market Case Studies collections and authored books. Professor Jain is recipient of more than 20 national and international awards and gold medals in research and scholarship. So she is just a perfect person to give the closing remarks to this webinar. Varsha, over to you.
Thank you so much, Manisha. Thank you so much for being with all of you. And I really look forward to take this discussion forward. And the way I'm going to give and it's very, helpful to provide the closing remarks because you've already captured a lot of information about the conceptualization, publishing, and taking the work forward. So what I'm going to essentially do is I have segregated my entire discussion into two categories. Category one would be, I will share my own personal journey with you all as a scholar, which will provide a closing remark, so to say, in terms of our discussion, and take that forward. And secondly, I'll little bit explain what is required to be a good scholar and how to take that scholarly journey forward. So I'll just share my screen with you all and try to, provide that journey, so to say, in terms of understanding how we are heading forward. So when I say conceptualization to publishing, as I clearly mentioned, it is all my personal journey, which I have done as a scholar. And I thought it would be a good idea to discuss and summarize whatever we have been discussing with our editorial team and the publishing team. So here is the summary which I could think about. As a scholar, you actually work on research, publishing, and you actually work about a passion which you have in your research, the curiosity with which you do research, and you provide that particular contribution to the global knowledge system, so to say. And of course, as authors, we work on different aspects, as Rajat was mentioning very clearly. You address the editorial reviews in a very polite manner. Manisha also explained about the entire process. So entirely, the scholars, I believe that need to work on three aspects, the 3C model. One is the curiosity has to be inbuilt. That cannot be given by anybody in the world. Second is, what is the concept which you are working on, which has to be very clear, which has to be relatable. And we do a backward planning, so to say. Once you have an idea in your mind, you need to understand, okay, who are the interested journals where I can align the idea, basis which you do the conceptualization. It's not that you're going to develop the manuscript and then you're going to decide which journal you're going to target. So it's very different in terms of the publishing. You have an idea at that point of time. Only when you're conceptualizing your paper, you need to go back and identify those kind of journal, frame and position the manuscript based on the requirement of the journal, so to say. So that is something which is very important in terms of the concept. Then, of course, the third and very important aspect is about the context under which you're working. As we have already discussed, as qual, con, methodology, I'm not getting into all those detailing, but essentially you need to be clear about what you are dealing with as an area, who are the people who will be aligned together and can help you in developing that particular concept which you want to develop, and how will you provide those contributions. And even if you're looking for funding, then in that case, probably who are the co-authors who will be expertise in providing you that help. So primarily, if you look at the global scholarship, and that's what we practice, it's not about also the preaching, we do it every day, and which is the 360-degree approach which is there, which means that constantly you need to have your own mentors, you need to work with your colleagues, and you need to disseminate that with your students. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is based purely on the experience that we have in the scholarly world. So it's like, this is our own framework which we develop, LCD, which is learning. You need to learn every day. Today also, I learned so much about SAGE, about JOCC, and then you keep emerging as a scholar. Learning doesn't mean there is a hierarchy of learning. Learning can come from anybody. And then you co-create knowledge with the partners that you select for your research, and then you disseminate. And if you look at the model, it's a cyclical model. It keeps evolving, and you keep improvising your work until you get it published. And publication is important because you give back to the society, you give back to the scholarly discipline which you belong to, or maybe other disciplines as well. So besides this, I also wanted to highlight on a very important aspect that giving back to the discipline is not only about, curating the knowledge and publishing, but also reviewing the papers and having constructive feedback as well. So anybody can give back at any level. Besides this, this is another, important aspect of integrated research, which you align with the scholarly world, which you provide to the research world, as well as you help them to educate further. And of course, you provide it back to the academic world as well. And this is entirely the stakeholders that we are looking forward, which helps the research for the industry, teaching, and the society. Stakeholders are not only the the industry, but they are also the society for which you actually provide those contributions to your research. So that issue can, the research problem can emerge. And yesterday, a few hours before, we were discussing that how you can actually give back and create more contributions, so to say, in the pandemic or post-pandemic scenarios. And there are a lot of opportunities that are emerging. For example, we were discussing about, how the consumption pattern of the people have changed, how culture has created that kind of an impact, how hybrid systems will be used, what will be the futuristic model which will be used by the individuals, how these people are going to, work in the online space, and also create those human touch points, because technology is not very effective unless you have certain touch points, so to say, in order to take your idea forward. So I think these are the categories. And I just wanted to mention that as scholars, we have to be independent. You always take the guidance, but the curiosity is something which has to be very independent. You have to be very much passionate about your own area, which you want to work about, whether it's marketing, communication, media, any cross-discipline work which you have to do. And as our AEs has already spoken about the interactiveness, that means the scholars have to be interactive. They have to do the interactions with their own scholarly world. They have to do interactions with the editors. They have to do the interactions with the entire author community, editorial board. And for that, they have to be very polite and humble. As we have already discussed, that you may get a rejection, but that doesn't mean that's the end of your journey of that particular paper. You might get some kind of opening remarks for other journals as well. And you need to integrate every time, because without integration, nothing works. It has to be very interdisciplinary, because you're not working on a particular discipline. It has to be always interconnected. Yesterday, we were also discussing about the futuristic aspects of the consumers, individuals, markets, cultures, and all of that. But what we also have to do to make the manuscript very, interesting and creative is that we have to curate that from other disciplines. For example, in one of the work that we have been working on in customer supports, we have taken a lot of literature from the design aspect, because we are working on the design of the customer services. So that interconnection, of course, is challenging, because you're not expertise into that particular discipline, but you have to connect those parts to make it interesting. And the last part is about the impact. How do you create an impact on the society? How do you create an impact on your own discipline? And I think impact is not being assessed by the scholar themselves, but how do you nurture? And I think all our panel members have explained that how do you nurture the scholars as a reviewer? How do you help them create a lot of value? So with that, I would come to the second part, and this is what I'll close my remarks with, which is that when you work on the LCD model, which I just shared with you, when you work as a scholar on the 7i model, what you need also within, besides your passion and curiosity, is the entire environment under which you nurture as a scholar, which is what we do at MICA at our doctoral program, where we provide the resources, because believe me, without resources, without the ecosystem, it is nearly impossible to get nurtured as a scholar. So we believe in practicing it ourselves, and that's why I shared my own journey with you all. And whatever I shared till now was my own personal experience, but we put that in practice and we provide that ecosystem so that our emerging scholars can be nurtured properly. We use LCD model in our doctoral program. We use 7i model in our doctoral program to ensure that, people at an initial stage, if they're coming from industry or academics, doesn't matter, they should be nurtured in such a way so that they become the emerging scholars and they can contribute to the global academics. So we are in a process of doing the admissions right now. The closing date is March 31st, and there is an entire process which has been there, but I'm sure that it will help you if you go online and search for it. So basically, I just wanted to end this, that, as a scholar, we always have to have a journey, and the journey is always aligned with the academic community as well as the community which is coming from the industry and the stakeholders. Try to add value to your stakeholders and give back to that particular society. So with that, I would stop here. And thank you so much, everybody, for this wonderful opportunity. And I look forward for more discussions. Thank you so much, Manisha.
Thank you, Varsha. I think you ended this whole webinar beautifully, by paying attention to our vision, that it's the impact that matters. It is the right ecosystem and right training and guidance that matters. And I'm glad that at JOCC and MICA, we are trying to do that. So thank you, everyone. I think your comments and your insights were very valuable to the participants. We have started receiving positive comments about how helpful all these inputs were. So I'm not taking much time now. I just have to make 3 announcements. Is that there is a feedback form that we would request all the participants to fill. It will be very helpful for us to plan our future webinars. There is also a potential reviewer expression of interest form. So if you are interested and if you think that you have the right mindset and qualifications to review for JOCC, we would like to expand our reviewer base. So please fill out that form. And yes, you will be getting an e-certificate, but only if you submit the feedback form. So that's an important an announcement that I would like to make. I would hand over this now to Professor Kallol Das, who would walk you through the question and answer. I know that we are little over time limit that we had for the webinar. So Kallol, entirely up to you how you want to go about the Q&A. Thank you.
So, thank you, Manisha. So I'll start with the first question, and maybe you can take it up, Manisha. Is JOCC a Scopus ranked journal? This has come from Namdi.
Yes. It is a Scopus ranked journal. We are ranked at 191 out of 387 communication journals. So we are there somewhere, in the middle rank of journals with the site score of, as I said, 1 and impact factor of 10.
H index.
Yeah, H index of 10.
So the second question is, how does the journal manage conflicting reviewer comments? And maybe Rajat, you can address this. You're on mute.
Rajat, you are still on mute.
Right, back in business. So
Yeah.
every associate editor looks at the comments carefully from 2 reviewers. They also take into account the overall contribution the paper is making towards theory, how it has furthered the knowledge. It's possible that 2 reviews could be at conflict, but it's really important to finally slice and dice it and understand where does the conflict come from, what's the origin of the conflict, and how the authors and the team of authors have actually addressed those conflicting comments. But over and above everything, the key force that guides all editor, associate editor, reviewer is what is the useful contribution you're making to the field of communication and to the field of knowledge. That should be the guiding force, if I've answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely, Rajat. And I would add that there have also been times where we have felt that, a third reviewer is important. And then we do appoint a third reviewer to make sure that, we give the right verdict. But otherwise, JOCC tends to be, leaning towards a positive review. So if out of the 2 reviews, if 1 review is positive, we tend to go towards that.
Right.
Thank you, Rajat. So last question, and probably Debbie can address this. This is from Namdi again. Can someone request a transfer of preprint articles from Sage Advanced Print to JOCC?
Okay. How this works is that if you've submitted your article on a preprint server like Advanced, so then it would be, of course, there, it would be assigned a DOI. Now, the process of your submitting an article to a peer-reviewed journal is separate. So if it goes through the process and it gets accepted, so once the paper is accepted, then there will be a separate DOI through from that journal, which will be assigned to that, peer-reviewed paper. You can link it to the preprint DOI. So that's what you can do. You can link your accepted paper, the published paper, with the preprint DOI. So you can't just transfer it directly, because that is not the the aim of the preprint server. Preprint server basically allows you to make it available more quickly, your research more quickly, and also allows you to have potential future collaborations. So, for example, you want to have co-authors who will contribute to that research. So you find co-authors through the preprint server, and then you all can have a collaboration, and then a joint paper can be submitted to a peer-reviewed to an academic journal, and then it would go through its due process of peer review. So you can link DOIs, the accepted paper and the preprint DOIs.
So I'm over with the questions. Over to you, Manisha.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, we can wrap up the webinar here. And of course, feel free to send your questions on social media. You know that JOCC is active on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. So yeah, please keep sending us the question, your suggestions about what kind of future webinars you would like to have, and we'll be happy to do that. I think on that note, I thank all the speakers, Sage, MICA FPM, team, and all our participants.
Thank you, Professor.
Good night. Have a nice day.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Rajat, Sun, Wang, Varsha, Debbie.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Of course, Arpit, Archie,
A big thank you.
Leslie,
Very
and the
big.
IT team.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we can now stop going live, Arpit. That would be good.